I feel young, born with a weak heart. Guess I must be having fun. Let's be sad about it better. Making up as we go along. Feet on the ground, head in the sky. It's so pretty, I know nothing's wrong with nothing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Blockchain Banter. I'm Jen, your host, and I'm here with Dylan Shub, founder of Crown Capital and Fat Cats DAO, along with Mark Richardson, head of research at Bancor. Welcome, guys, and thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Dylan, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to start with you. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into this space.
Sure. So I'm told objectively quite an interesting story because I came from the world of private banking. And then in the last recession around 2009, becoming 2012, the writing was on the wall that, you know, offshore accounts was not going to be the same as it used to be. No one wanted kind of American and British clients and stuff. And so I pivoted then to fine art consulting, which might seem like quite a kind of a jump over. But when you're dealing in private banking and with family offices, you're often dealing with high net worth families and institutions. And so that also included a lot of involvement with Christie's and Sotheby's and so on. And I'd always been a passionate art lover going to auctions when I was 9. So it just felt like a good pivot for me. And that allowed me to work a lot from home. And so I was moonlighting then in Second Life, the first iteration of the metaverse, for close to 10 years. And I remember kind of, you know, when the whole Bansky situation happened, sorry, not Bansky, People situation happened for 60 million. I'd been talking to Sotheby's and Christie's at the time, and they're like, yeah, we're in Decentraland. Come and check out our CryptoPunk exhibition. And I'm thinking, what is going on over here? And after jumping into that and listening to a podcast with the person who bought the Beeple artwork, he was going on about virtual real estate and property rights. And I'm like, you know, I'm very libertarian. And, you know, that's the one thing we've never really had on the internet is property rights. And so I quickly pivoted here. Came and started looking at metaverse platforms, was a little bit unimpressed, but saw from, well, let's put it this way. I was unimpressed on the visual side, on the visual fidelity, as it's called, but very impressed on the technical side, how quickly it had gone from kind of crypto kitties to these metaverse platforms and games. And then we decided it was time to kind of found Crown Capital. To me, the big moment there was the Gala Games ecosystem opening. I just couldn't wrap my head around the notion that we could kind of own the guilds and own the land. You know, I'm now preferring to say these terms play and own instead of kind of play to earn and stuff, because I think that that really is the point we should be going back to all the time. You know, that is the dream of Satoshi Nakamoto and so many others, is that we should have digital ownership verifiable on the blockchain. And so that's kind of how I got here. And before we knew it, Fat Cats was open too, with a focus on blue chip NFT brands as opposed to what we would call AAA games that are being built on the blockchain.
Thank you so much. You actually really do kind of have an interesting story, but I think it's funny because anybody who was around for that $60 million Beeple sale kind of had the same thought, like, what is going on over here? Like that, it really was like a serious pivot from the introduction to like this height of that just happened, you know? Thank you so much. Mark, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the space?
Yeah, certainly. So I was an organic chemist, and so most of my background is in the physical and life sciences. I completed my doctorate in total synthesis. I was manufacturing compounds from the cell wall of tuberculosis and studying how they interact with the human immune system. I did my postdoc at UCI. There I was predominantly doing like nanotechnology and single molecule sensing devices. After UCI, I came back to Australia and started working for the Australian government at an organization called the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. There I was working on medical devices. I was trying to build sensing platforms to detect antibiotic-resistant bacteria so that physicians could prescribe the correct antibiotics the first time every time. I also, when COVID hit, in the early months of that, I was pivoted pretty hard because it was a government agency. I was pivoted pretty hard towards detecting COVID very quickly. So a lot of the first sort of strip antigen tests were manufactured in my lab. I'm not really sure what happened with that work because as COVID started to ramp up, the Australian government got kind of paranoid about it. So most of the government agents were basically sent home for the duration. And the city that I was living in, which was Melbourne, actually went into, I think, the longest contiguous shutdown period in world history. It was almost 2 years. And so I was doing a lot of work from home during that period, but, you know, as an experimentalist, there's not a whole lot of work you can get done, you know, from your garage without committing a felony. And so I was mostly, you know, just writing reviews and stuff, which was, you know, it's stuff that we're kind of expected to do as academics, but it really doesn't achieve very much. So I, you know, similar to Dylan, for me, the writing was on the wall. As an academic, you know, we actually have a lot in common with professional athletes in the sense that you're only as good as your last season. And if I, you know, hadn't really been publishing any, you know, heavy hitting, you know, original research publications in those 2 years, you know, I really wasn't going to be competitive for, you know, new grant schemes and scholarships and fellowships and things like that. So I started to look at other opportunities where I could be useful. I was really attracted to what was happening in DeFi, right? This is right around DeFi summer. I was paying very close attention to Uniswap, SushiSwap, KaibaSwap. You know, I think the idea of decentralized exchange is just phenomenally powerful. And then I kind of settled into Bancor as I was sort of reading through the documentation that existed around the project. I really believed in the idea of it. The utility token aspect of BNT, I think, is just fascinating. And I, you know, kind of agreed with the ethos and philosophy behind the project. I became a pretty prominent DAO participant. I wrote some of the original DAO guidelines after the DAO was first launched. And then as I met the founders and started speaking with them about ways that I think that the system can be improved, the foundation reached out to me in January of 2021 with a research grant essentially. And so I've been a part of the ecosystem ever since, and I've been working hard on trying to make AMMs more decentralized, more efficient, and you know, better for users. Obviously, you know, with the market downturn, we've had some issues. You know, a lot of our ecosystem is kind of underpinned by the BNT price, which is something that's very difficult to exert any control over. And so one of our most prominent features, which was the impermanent loss protection mechanism, was suspended in order to essentially protect the protocol and everyone inside of it. I know it's been an extremely controversial time for us, but I think as the clouds begin to clear, and as a lot of the work that I've been doing since that time begins to come to light, I'm optimistic for a bright future for the project.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mark. Aside from those issues, there's still so much happening right now with Crown and Bancor. And before we jump into all of that, Dylan, you mentioned Fat Cats and Crown Capital. Did Crown Capital come before Fat Cats?
It did indeed, because this is why I say we're interesting. We're almost backwards in a way. We got together because of Miranda's, which was the flagship game we were looking into, and said, look, an institution just bought one of the capitals, right? One of the citadels over there for 3.5 million. We're dolphins, we're not killer whales yet. We probably need to pool our assets together. And so we pooled our assets together. We started these kind of private DAOs with the intention, of moving quickly to more of a public DAO and a coin. And then we realized, when you bring a group of people together, we had other interests that we shared. And one of those interests was what we call, what we're looking at when we see something like CryptoPunks or Bored Ape Yacht Club is a blue chip NFT brand. CryptoPunks is unique, and I could spend an hour talking about that. But let's, take Bored Ape Yacht Club. I think people can see it as a potential kind of Web3 native blue chip NFT brand that is going to start to build a mixed media empire, right? Whether that's a game, a metaverse platform, a cartoon. That is what we saw when we looked over kind of, the river to the other side. And so we decided that we should have a spin-off DAO so that we could kind of have the funds focused on their niches.
Okay, so yeah, backwards, I was actually thinking that Fat Cats came before Crown Capital. So you explained a little bit of how it works, but maybe you can explain what Crown actually is. I feel like maybe I went right over that. Essentially, a group of you got together. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I would say that the easiest way to look at Crown Capital is for those who haven't played World of Warcraft or some of those games. These games turn into micro economies, right? When they really do start to take off on a mass adoption level, and you look at classic games, guilds can have 50 members. There can be micro economies or macro economies going on where people are bartering and trading for weapons and so on. What has been missing has usually been the aspect that, these are on a marketplace independent of the account, right? It used to be that if you played World of Warcraft and your account got closed, so your assets were linked to that, right? They didn't have a free market, as we would call it. Now what's going on is we're going to take all of those game mechanics, all those things people enjoyed, but give them ownership on the blockchain of those underlying assets, which means that if they violate terms of service and the game says, we don't want to play with you, that's fine. I can still sell my assets on OpenSea or something. But even, let's take the best case scenario. No one's been canceled. No one's been closed to anything. There's still this micro economy that's going to happen, which we see the likes of in things like Roblox and Second Life. And so the idea behind Crown Capital was really to establish a fund that would operate probably like a property REIT, right? We're going to be, we've got the governance in the form of our board of governors. We're going to appoint managers for the specific games. I believe we've got assets in our 8 different games. And then underneath those managers, we'll be giving out tenders to different guilds with a profit sharing model. So let's take Miranda's, which is kind of a medieval city type game. We might give a contract out to a guild that's got 200 members, whereby they have the exclusive rights to manage our forges and blacksmith shops and the mining and the whole supply chain over there, and then do all the accounting reporting back to us, and we will do a profit sharing.
I wanted to just quickly opine on this because it's something that's fascinated me for a really long time. That the futurists of the 1940s up to about the 1960s were sort of observing this increasing trend where, as the industrial world moves towards greater automation, and as women and started to enter the workplace, it was pretty clear that the amount of sort of productive work that was required of people living in any civilized environment was going to drop over time. And so it was really unclear, what was going to happen there. There were a school of thought that people would either elect to work, right? Like work would become optional just because there wouldn't be enough stuff for people to do. There is a really great book. I can't remember the title, but I remember it was advertised as something to the effect of, if you think that your job is worthless, it probably is. Right, because even in capitalist societies, we started to adopt this quasi socialist, even communist sort of leaning mentality that everyone should be employed, and kind of jobs are just kind of created for people regardless of whether or not those jobs are even important. And this is having a really interesting impact on like how people spend their free time, and also how they value their achievements when they do these things. And I think that when we sort of, when the Xbox 360 was released, and these ideas of your accomplishments in games can be sort of, it can become an accolade, right, that's attached to your account. And then things like World of Warcraft, as Dylan has already pointed out, and things like Second Life, there is this stuff that people are doing in their free time, generally in electronic games, that they value, right? That they attach their value to. And in things like World of Warcraft, there are things that you can do or earn or get for, some, just by chance, that are extremely rare and that improve people's experience inside that game, and therefore have a type of value attached to it. And I think, it was very controversial around the time I was in high school, or towards the end of high school, where people were actually, getting these really rare items and then auctioning them off on eBay and things. It was pretty clear that there was going to be a demand for this stuff, because the way that people are spending their time is increasingly leaning towards, these other ways of keeping yourself occupied. And because that's important to people, it does, it increases the value of the things that you can get and trade in these games. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting emerging economy. I think that Dylan was right to call it a micro economy, but I'm not sure how long it will be micro. Obviously, projects like Engine and entire blockchains are now focusing on specifically on gaming style resources and assets, and ensuring that users actually have digital ownership over them. I don't think that this is going to be niche. I'm not even sure if today we can call it a niche market, right? It's pretty old.
Just to clarify, Mark, what I mean by micro is in microtransactions, right? In other words, I've got friends in Second Life who earn £5,000 a month as top tier creators and artists over there, and yet the way they do that is by selling 2,000 chairs at 50 cents each, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I just wanted to, I guess I just wanted to say that this is something that I've watched emerge, and I think it's super interesting. And I think that any project that's being built around it, I think it shows maybe a little bit more foresight than people realize.
Yeah, I think, if the philosopher Yuval Noah Harari talks a lot about, as we move into kind of the 21st century and our stories change about, change necessarily away from religion and the nation state to kind of your personal mission and forging meaning, people can look at these things and laugh as much as they want. And yet the story of collectibles and art is all about people putting a high value behind things with scarcity and that give them emotional feelings or forge meaning for them, right? And what we have seen in the explosion of the gaming industry, which now surpasses over 3 billion active players, is that people are unashamed at saying, yes, you go home and watch 2 hours or 3 hours and binge watch on Netflix. I go on with my guild. We have an awesome time. I'm spending, 50, 60, 70 bucks, whatever a month as my entertainment budget. It's the price of a steak and, and 2 Cokes or whatever. This is how I forge meaning. And so, it's a funny thing. One of the big eye-openers for me as far as games go wasn't necessarily the World of Warcraft. It was the grindy games like RuneScape. And the fact that people could spend hours and hours and hours, forging kind of a hammer, and that hammer, because it had human labor that could actually be outsourced to a bot, but it had been handmade, if you will, in some bizarre way, that really, interested me, because that is what, things like Mirandus and a lot of these games will do. A lot of these things could be done by bots. In fact, bots are a major issue that they have to work through. And yet people will pay a premium if someone had to go through the whole process of mining the goods while there was danger around, bringing the goods back to the town, bartering to a blacksmith, the blacksmith then forges it, and so on and so forth. So, that still blows my mind. But I think that the key missing element wasn't how people interact with games. It was that we really didn't have property rights in the Web2 experience until now.
Right. And I think that, there's an aspect of transferability maybe to that property right as well that I think is important. So, for example, in 2008, I had a friend who was one of the best Call of Duty players in the world, right? And one of the things that he was offering to people, and making pretty decent money doing it, was that they would bequeath to him their login details on Xbox Live, and the service that he would provide would be to go and essentially unlock different weapon skins and things for them, because it was kind of a status symbol within that society. If you wanted to be respected in your guild or your club, some of them even had admission criteria that if you didn't meet those admission criteria, they wouldn't accept you. And so he would basically offer to go and get these items for them, so that they could be a part of that community. And that's just interesting to me that it is something that people valued because it improved the quality of life for them. I think people kind of brush that under the rug, but these are things that have a marked impact on people's experiences and the way that they relate to each other. And it's an already big and I think increasing part of Western civilization, certainly, but certainly in places like Korea as well. So I think that it's a culturally universal phenomenon and something that we should all be paying attention to.
Really quickly, I see that it's an emerging market, and you kind of have this foresight, right? But I've heard from people with friends that are big gamers that there's this sort of resistance from hardcore gamers kind of getting into blockchain and Web3 and actually tokenizing or having these property rights that we kind of see as a benefit and a necessity almost. I'm curious if you, Dylan, have experienced any of that sort of feedback or that pain point or resistance from any of the gamers that in that industry aside from Web3. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I was never a big gamer. I spent a lot of time in Second Life because I was much more interested in kind of cosplay, right? I ran a community for a couple of years, which was like a medieval island with a very enthusiastic 450 person community. And I saw a lot of pushback over there to Web3. Then I also played Magic the Gathering for many years. It's fascinating how many people in the crypto space played Magic. And there's pushback there. And then there's pushback in the gamers. I mean, I do hang out sometimes on 4chan and Reddit. I've got a bit of a morbid sense of humor. So I've always enjoyed a good troll and reading a troll thread. So I find it rather interesting. And there is a major pushback, despite the fact, it's funny because this Twitter space brings together two sides of Twitter that hardly ever speak, which is crypto Twitter and NFT Twitter, right? And it's interesting because those same gaming haters, many of them on 4chan, consider themselves anarchists and libertarians. And so they're very big in favor of crypto coins, and yet they've got a pushback to digital ownership. And I think, Jen, the main pushback is threefold. Number one, they have become comfortable with not having ownership, right? These same people who used to bitch to me about logging into Eve and blowing up their ships worth 10,000 because they couldn't sell them or transfer them anyway, are feeling like, look, this is comfortable. Don't break my game, right? My game is all I have. Don't break my stuff. And then, as I think, there's also the aspect that NFTs have had a lot of, dare I say, Ponzinomics associated with them, right? They've been very faddy and very kind of low substance, right? In other words, we're almost still in the age of gimmicky utility, that because we're using this branding NFTs, I mean, I've spoken to a number of media people and they're like, we really have to rebrand something like digital ownership. We have to get away from that word NFTs because it's been so used in pump and dumps. And then the third aspect is, transition is uncomfortable, right? In order to get everything on the blockchain, we are going to have to slow down their games, right? We're going to kind of ruin something. I remember when Second Life announced the creation of Sunzar, which was their spin-off, and it was going to focus on VR and AR, and the forums blew up. I've never seen the Second Life people so angry. And the anger was around the fact that, how come you're building this new thing, this new engine? Why didn't you fix what we already have? And despite the fact that the devs got on and explained, we can't, this is an old engine, we cannot upgrade it. They're like, well then screw it. Who cares about VR and AR? Make our game the best it can be. In other words, make us comfortable. And that's the sense I get. And so the big gaming houses right now have a very difficult situation ahead of them, because on the one hand, regulations are still not clear. So they're not coming out vocally in favor of this. They don't quite know how to share ownership of assets yet with the regulations. And number two, they don't know how to create a blockbuster game while also keeping their current gamers happy, right? Because you can lose it all. You can try and add the blockchain to your existing game, slow down the game. Everyone will get pissed and move to another game because we vote with our feet. It's quite fickle. Or they can try and do a parallel game whereby their holders, like in Second Life, might feel abandoned. So it's a very difficult road. But I think the moment we have a couple of AAA games come out from like Illuvium or Gala or the like, I think people will kind of understand that it's not an either-or situation, right? Most people don't just play one game. They can come and explore it, test it, and go, you know what? I see value to this. I'm not ready to completely write off what I'm doing, but I could do this as well, right? Like if I can have a bit of fun and maybe also build a cool collection or have a side gig, that's going to be awesome. And that's what you also saw in Magic the Gathering. Very few people talked about Magic the Gathering as a full-time business for them. And yet many people would spend more than they would normally on anything because it had a value that they could trade it, swap it, the card had a market, and so on and so forth. So, collectors understand this, that, you spend more when you have a potential resale value. And I think the gamers just have kind of got desensitized. They're trying to protect what they have, and they will come around when we show something excellent like they have with crypto.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent answer. And I think as far as like the NFTs as Ponzi-nomics, I think some on the outside looking in kind of see the entire industry really as kind of like this great big Ponzi. And so it's not just NFTs that kind of have this, or GameFi that have this thing to prove. It's the industry really overall. I want to speak about Crown really quickly. First of all, congratulations, because your first liquidity pool just went live about 2 weeks ago on Bancor V3. So congratulations on that.
And deposits went live 2 days ago. That quietly went up. The devs have been working very quickly at Bancor. They got the UI up for us, so we've now been able to make deposits. And staking rewards were just sent over yesterday, so those go live in the next 2 days as well. So you guys have been working very fast. Before I even forget, I want to shout out to your customer service, because as much as we all talk about decentralized finance and DAOs and everything is verifiable on the blockchain, the fact is we all know that the Ethereum Foundation does a lot behind closed doors, right? Good governance is good governance. Good customer service is good customer service. And without kind of throwing others under the bus, Bancor has been really good at getting back to us on some of these difficult questions, giving us timelines and frustrating us at times too. But hey, you were dealing with a collapse, and I think you managed it, very well. And I'd like to come back to the elephant in the room, which Mark talked about when you're ready. But yeah, we've had a very good experience working with you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That I think might be directed towards you. But
yeah. No, thank you so much for saying that, Dylan. Like, it's been a really rough few months. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are really pissed off with us, and it's been really dark times. And we're working so hard to try and sort of right the ship and get everything back on course. And yeah, honestly, it's been just so great. I remember, I think the first time that we spoke together was when I was on a call with you and Kevin, and I was kind of breaking down how all of the swap functions work and how fees accumulate, and how everything basically fits together. And it was such a pleasant conversation to have, and I've been waiting for us to sort of have our follow-up chat with everything. But yeah, I'm so glad that it's been a pleasant experience. It's you don't know how much it warms my heart to hear you say that. So thank you so much.
Dylan, I guess with this being so fresh, right? Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Fat Cats DAO is, I mean, the NFT itself actually serves as the membership token, right? So is this your first actual tokenized project where you require a liquidity pool and everything else?
Yes, because exactly. In other words, for Crown, it's this interesting thing, right? Why make a profile picture, right? Like, again, it was backwards, right? We started with Crown always intending it to be a coin. And yet when we spoke about doing blue chip NFT brands, we knew we had to do a profile picture. And that was purely a branding decision. It's these funny things in DeFi crypto versus NFT crypto versus, GameFi. It's one of these things like, the gaming NFT side has a fortune of money. And it's these quiet whales who are very patient and everything else for the most part, relatively speaking. In NFT space, everything is about your image, your brand, making a loud noise, clapping your hands, right? Because it's such a noisy place. And so for Fat Cats, we knew we needed to give our holders a branded identity that they could flex over Twitter and in the games we're being integrated into, stuff like that, which was not necessary for Crown. But it's funny because Fat Cats is pretty much a traditional value fund, maybe with an add-on of a business lounge, think tank, a Discord and stuff like that. But, we've got this degen quirky image attached to it because that is how you flex provenance and which community you're associated with. Whereas with Crown, really we feel that once the game's open, everyone will be kind of, branding us with the guild, right? They'll say we're part of Crown Capital Guild, or if you're in Metalcore, they'll say we're part of Crown Corp. And so we really didn't feel we needed a JPEG kind of covering the coin.
Now, I would imagine, like you had just said, you have to kind of go from two different angles when it's an NFT project and then when it's more of like a DeFi focused project. I guess I want to ask about the actual process. Was it kind of what you were expecting? Like you said that, you wanted to give this shout out for the customer service at Bancor and helping you with all these difficult questions. And with the space growing like it is, I imagine we just continue to see more people entering the space and wanting to create their own projects. And was this process what you were thinking it was going to be, or was it something completely different in terms of actually like launching Crown Capital and the token and what was involved with all of that?
Yeah, so I'm old enough to remember the dot-com crisis, so I knew what the 1998 euphoria looked like in the slowdown, and then I was in private banking during the 2008 crisis. So my expectation, I remember saying to my mother, oh God, we're in the hype, like we're in the tulip bubble right now. Because, when we started Crown Capital was around August, September last year. So, I mean, I said to her, I literally have to say the word NFT or play and earn games, and an angel comes out from heaven and handed me $1,000, right? It was like that kind of moment. Like we literally, the history of Crown Capital was our aim was to raise $100,000 to buy a town. Literally 6 weeks later, we were closer to 800,000, right? So, we knew we were moving very fast. We quickly opened sub-guilds to invest in a bunch of other games that entered our shortlist. And we knew we were going to make a Crown token. What we planned our history to be was we would do a copper ICO, and then we would open a liquidity pool afterwards. And I'm going to give a shout out to them. It's not really trying to throw them under the bus, but when we founded Crown, Axie Infinity was at its all-time high. I mean, I think there was something like 2.4 million active users, and the big guilds comparable to us are far bigger than us, but they were TCG World, and then Merit Circle was just opening an Avocado DAO. And I remember looking at these guilds and at those games, and I'm one for being a team player. I'm happy to invest in a project that's doing everything I wanted. I don't have to be at the driving seat. But I looked at those games that were really had made the promise to their investors that they would focus on income producing assets immediately. And I thought to themselves, they've got themselves into a death spiral, because that means that they're going to have to be heavily over-invested in Axie Infinity as the only game really active. And Axie Infinity, to me, was... I do not feel the devs had any bad intention. It started as an indie kind of game, and so it blew up from there. But it was too simplistic. There was no way that a complex economy could sustain itself out of its initial model. It wasn't that fun to play, right? It wasn't like Magic the Gathering. It had one kind of singular circular thing of breeding, playing, playing. And all of the people they had attracted were literally there for, as the term said back then, play and earn. They literally were there as an income. And this was a perfect storm for a bubble. And so when we founded Crown, we've got some of the founding members over here, I said, look, let's be honest, Miranda's and stuff are probably 4 to 6 months bullish on their timeline, maybe even 8 to 12 months. But that doesn't mean we can be stupid here and go into a game that's probably not going to be sustainable. Let's rather go for the next level of more complex games like Miranda's and Illuvium and Big Time, and now Other Side, with the understanding that we'll probably be kind of like in a hiatus, in an incubate, in a hibernation stage for a while, right? Our governors have elected, for example, not to be paid in the meantime, because, just because we're hungry and wanted to get in a game doesn't mean the game we wanted has arrived yet. So that was kind of our timeline. And when we were looking for our ICO, we thought, it just doesn't make sense. In fact, we had also raised a good more amount of money than we thought we would, so there was no rush to do that. But we needed a liquidity pool. And we were at the time looking at a few others, and Kevin came to us and said, have you explored Bancor? And I had looked into Bancor, but I knew about Bancor V2, and I really hadn't been following the story of V3. And I said, you know what, let's explore it. And I remember tweeting out that we're looking into it. And I think within a couple of hours, Bancor had retweeted back. And within the day, I had gotten a podcast, a YouTube podcast with Josh Schoen. And we were very, very impressed, because the Bancor vision answered a number of things for us, right? We know as the provider, we had to have a deep liquidity pool for our holders to be able to come in and out, right? Always the benefit of an open market, a stock market or anything, is that ability for people to get that liquidity, to trade, to speculate, and so on. And as it stood, we had, over 1 million locked up in private equity, if you will, and people could only really buy and sell between each other. But at the same time, the way money markets work in crypto, is you do not have yet what we have as a market maker in stocks, which is seamless. You have to create these pools. You have to, provide both sides of liquidity. And that kind of took away from our ability to take our money and buy more gaming assets, right? Our core business is to buy and sell the gaming assets and then to use them. And so when we understood that Bancor had had solved the question of one-sided liquidity, we got very excited. The least important part to us was actually the external protection, because we just took that as a risk of the market. We loved that individual pools could have external protection. And this is the elephant in the room I wanted to bring up, because to us, when we saw all the problems happen with Bancor, all we really wanted to understand was, if we created a pool, would it be safe? Would it be able to operate? Could we provide the insurance? And then go from there. And so understanding the difference between, the insurance protection that is provided to the Crown holders versus what Bancor was initially trying to do, which was create protection even to pools that didn't bring their kind of own insurance policy, helped us understand that, things made sense for us with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up, because I think it's one of the less well appreciated design principles behind version 3, which is that we really did want to find a way that we could cater to very long tail tokens, right? And with Crown being sort of the in the bootstrapping liquidity phase is definitely sort of in that category. And in a way, this is very much going back to Bancor's roots as trying to support cryptocurrency in general. Right, this concept of exchange is something that is like absolutely paramount. You would, I think you were right on the money there when you were talking about the fact that we don't really have the same instruments yet in DeFi, where it's easy to transact between individuals in the way that we have in traditional money markets. And so you really do have to create these liquidity pools from scratch. And we've always identified that this is one of the biggest hurdles that are facing new token projects, that they either have to find a way to sell off a large amount of their token supply in order to buy some other numeraire, usually ETH in the case of dexes like Uniswap and SushiSwap. And that's not always practical, right? If there isn't already an existing liquidity supply for that token, then it's very difficult to find ways to exchange it for another numeraire. Or you have to dip into the funds that should be spent on development, or in your case, in buying and trading gaming assets. And so, to sacrifice some of those funds just for the purpose of creating a liquidity pool can seem like a backward step. And it really was something that we wanted to address. Now, with the Bancor single-sided staking situation, we also knew that impermanent loss protection was a key feature, but it's just it's impossible for the BNT token to sustain that protection mechanism by itself forever. And so we built in this external protection mechanism so that new token projects could provide that to their liquidity providers on their own. And this kind of feeds into, the rewards mechanism as well, right? We wanted to create a rewards mechanism that wouldn't create a selling motive for liquidity providers in order to stay competitive in that pool, which is something that usually causes, token projects to take on, let's say, unexpected or unintended selling pressure that can make the token less attractive over time. And so, yeah, Bancor version 3 really was built with a lot of these sort of long tail facing features in mind. And it's so exciting to hear you talk about them and understand them and appreciate them, and that you found value in it, because it's everything that I wanted for new projects to enjoy. And yeah, you don't know how important it is for me to hear you say all of this. It's absolutely the best news that I've heard in a long time, and I'm just so excited to have you guys on board. I wanted to ask as well, like, I assume that you've been sort of around in different communities that are starting their own token projects and things. Do you think that your appreciation for the importance of having token liquidity is unique, or in the minority? Because it's not often that I have conversations with people that are launching their own token for the first time, that kind of understand the difficulty, right, with bootstrapping liquidity, or at least the importance of liquidity, or the importance of deep liquidity for the first time. I'm wondering if you think it's maybe your financial background in private banking that kind of makes you see the importance of this straight away. Do you think it's because of your background, or do you think that it's a generally appreciated thing that liquidity is something that you just can't dispense with?
I think there's 2 points. For sure, I was going to say that for sure my connection to traditional stock markets gave me a lot of perspective, because the way Bancor V3 is set up, with everything kind of paired with the Bancor token, is actually more akin to a stock market, right? Because on the same stock market, you can have the Fortune 500, and you can have things all the way down to the mid tiers and small caps, right? You can have a company there having transactions as seamlessly with a 10 million market cap as a company with a 10 billion market cap. Sure, the price will fluctuate more, right? Like if the depth of the amount of shares bought will cause the price to spike more on a small cap than on a big cap, but they really are in the same market. And when you look at something like Uniswap and SushiSwap, that's not the case, because every pool was really independent, right? And so it becomes a very glaring detail, the fact that our pool only has 1 million depth, whereas, and that would cause investors who might otherwise be interested in experimenting with us, taking a stake in us, they liked our idea, saying, look, I can't be in such an illiquid asset. So, we are much more akin now to a real stock market, and I don't think most people have realized that yet, probably because they don't understand the genius that is the commodity exchanges and the modern stock market. They just take it for granted, right? Like, the fact that, Elon Musk can go and sell all of his, billions of Tesla stock just at a click of a button type thing, calling his brokers, is a remarkable modern achievement that has gone over, I think, a lot of people's heads. And then secondly, I think we're somewhat unique in the fact that we're one of the few, tokens still in crypto space that is asset backed. Our assets might be Web3 assets, but we still are asset backed, right? Our valuation is somewhat linked to our equity. It's that funny thing that people talk about in NFTs. The moment you tell people your actual utility, then people can price you based on your utility. But if you tell them this mysterious idea that we're going to change the world and build a brand with the next Disneyland, then your floor can be 10x, right? Or 10 ETH or whatever. So I think that those two aspects, coming from a financial background, and I'm not the only one, many of our founding members have a financial background. A lot of them also, we've got some of our founding members are players in esports and in Manchester United, for example. So we do have a wide background of conventional people or people from the Web2 world. And on top of that, by the way, I want to mention that one of the other aspects that was so attractive to us is, I would say at least 30 to 40% of our initial Crown investors opened the MetaMask for the first time. Many of them have had Coinbase accounts, Kraken accounts, Binance accounts, but they've never had a MetaMask account before. And the idea of telling them that they have to stake in the pool and then take that stake token and stake it in another pool and then remember to unstake it because there's no compounded staking rewards and stuff like that really was starting to give them the shivers. And so a lot of these things that you guys have been working on to make our snapshot governance easier, to not have a stake a third time to get the Binance, to get the Bancor rewards and stuff like that, it might be kind of commonplace to a lot of the experts over here who are, active in DeFi, but to our holders, that's the kind of make or break situation that might have them say, screw it, I'm just going back to stocks.
I actually wanted to touch on that for a minute because previously, the idea like the auto compounding rewards came up in conversation, or the rewards program. And Mark was talking about not having the selling pressure from the LPs and anybody in that pool. But Dylan, you were giving shout outs earlier to everybody. I wanted to give you one personally, because when I had spoken with you the first time, it wasn't just all about your project. It was really about the community as well. And that was just super nice to hear as just like an average DeFi user and somebody who's part of different communities, to have such a focus on things that will benefit, members of your community and of your DAO. And the one that you had mentioned was the auto compounding rewards and the ease of use, not having to spend gas and to claim and restake. And you had highlighted that as one of the reasons, in addition to the single-sided liquidity, over the external liquidity protection, as one of the reasons that you chose Bancor. And I just thought it was great that you really had a focus on your community. So I wanted to just take a moment and give you your own shout out now.
Thank you. And, it's a funny thing, right? Because we're still in the era of kind of gimmicky utility, there is almost a humility. I'm going to call it, maybe a bit humiliating situation whereby we make people come and stake and unstake and stake again and stuff and kind of like wave and show they're participating, right? It's like people having to clock in at work and stamp their card. And it's because, we kind of wanted to show, no, you have to do something to participate in order to reap your rewards. Many of our investors are, 6-7 figure investment bankers and stuff like that. Or directors working, 9 to 5 and stuff. They don't have time to come and do these things. They wanted to buy a piece of something that they believed in that made sense to them, and then are happy to do profit sharing with anyone who wants to come and play the games and the guilds that we're going to work with. So, really being as similar to what they are familiar with is how we're going to get people on Web3, because, we know that the Bitcoin indices are already coming, right? And, people like BlackRock are going to just try and make a stock out of it. And other people are going to try and, keep people stuck in the Web2 version of trading Web3 assets. And that's terribly disappointing.
Yeah, the simplicity of it makes it a lot more approachable. It's easier to kind of enter the space when you are otherwise, like you said, Binance or Coinbase or something like that, using centralized exchanges. But then getting into any sort of a decentralized platform or anything like that is kind of unknown to them. And then on top of that, you had mentioned governance. So I want to talk about the Crown token a minute. It's a governance token. And you had mentioned using it as like BN Crown, right? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. And Mark,
Sure.
you
So,
also like the composability of it when Dylan's done.
yeah, sure. So our Crown tokens are a pro rata share and vote in the DAO. In other words, they literally, this is where we get into SEC questions, but our Belgium lawyers are fighting hard to state that we are a collectors club, and we're sticking to that. And we're busy working on getting our trust set up in Guernsey now. But basically, the idea is that each Crown token is a pro rata share and vote in the DAO. And we needed that the BN Crown, the state Crown, could have that same ability, right? Snapshot is this amazing technology that allows people to easily vote on protocols and procedures and ideas. But we needed that, both of those coins could easily do that, and they can, right? That's the beauty of Snapshot. You just add Snapshot, you add both contracts in, and we can do that. But then we've met the deadline. We're going to be getting BNT tokens as a reward over 2 years. I believe it's 50,000 BNT tokens as staking rewards. You guys are working on a way for us to not then have to then take our BN Crown and now put it into another rewards pool, and then have another snapshot required, requiring another token and so on. So those kinds of steps, those understandings of how people actually need to use the protocol, the fact that we are also using it for voting and for roles in our Discord and stuff like that is very important.
Yeah, so just speaking to that a little bit. So the philosophy behind that design principle was essentially recognizing that there is this problematic dichotomy between staking tokens for liquidity or providing liquidity with tokens and using them for their intrinsic use case. This is something I've been speaking about for quite a long time, because I do think that it's a problem that does need to be addressed. And I'm not alone. Vitalik Buterin has an entire blog post about this precise issue, in the sense that if people are wanting to support their project by providing liquidity with a voting token, then there is an issue there about how they can then participate in the DAO that they obviously have a large stake in if they're providing liquidity with tokens. And so the idea with the BN token, because it's completely single-sided, is to make that as easy as possible. And so this was, it's not an accident. We envisioned a whole suite of use cases for these things, where people could support liquidity simultaneously while using the token for whatever its intrinsic use case is, whether that be voting or validating something or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, the BN tokens were really built from the ground up specifically to service that simultaneous use case, so that people don't have to choose between using the token for in a manner that's consistent with what its design is, and providing liquidity with it. The idea was that you can do both.
Thanks so much, Dylan. I had a question submitted to me just now. A listener is looking for Crown. They don't see it on CoinGecko. They don't see it on CoinMarketCap. Are there any plans for that soon? How would someone find information on the actual Crown token?
Yeah, so indeed, it's this chicken and the egg thing. We we didn't want to apply to CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap without having the pool open, and so this is all so fresh that is our next step. Now that just yesterday, I mean, it's hard to believe that this kind of took so long, but the pool literally opened a week ago, and just yesterday we sent over the staking rewards and also staked the 12 million Crown tokens belonging to the DAO itself. So we're just getting there. So yes, CoinGecko and CoinMarketBureau are the two we'll be talking to in the next few weeks. How fast they respond to us is anyone's guess, but I do understand that they hold Bancor in quite high esteem. So hopefully that will help rush it across. But indeed, it goes to our main holders that most of them really are from like Lord of the Rings, the Ents, right? The big trees. They're very okay with things taking its time and taking its toll, and us kind of doing everything carefully. The amount of discussions we also had with you guys about understanding, the longevity. I see Philen's in the crowd, and I'm going to ask a question on his behalf. Now that kind of Bancor has understood kind of the critical failure of providing insurance for those who don't bring it themselves, one of the things we've been talking to your devs and Tiago and a few others about is that, let's avoid this. Let's not only kind of, hit a home run, let's knock it out of the park and make sure that those things don't happen again. And one of the things we've been discussing is what's called, I believe, internally with the devs, the leaky bucket theory, which is, maybe we can have up our transaction fees and have an ongoing amount of those transaction fees just go to keep growing our external insurance so that, it's like that situation, right? If you go to a bank and you want a loan, they're always happy to give people who don't need loans, right? We want a pool that's so deep that it almost acts as kind of a burning mechanism or a safety net that's never needed. And we're really happy that you guys are open to these discussions and are working very fast to kind of create out of the box thinking solutions to a bear market that we might be in for a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was something that that had been discussed already, and it was kind of confirmation that it's probably a good idea to hear you raise it as well. But yes, there is a design aspect to Bancor V3 where even pools that don't have a project that are willing to provide that insurance to their liquidity providers, which is a shame. It's possible to set up a type of insurance bucket where fees can collect inside that, or a portion of the fees can collect inside that. That can be used to effectively self-fund the insurance for that pool. It's complicated. I mean, for Crown, it's relatively straightforward. For some of the other tokens, that there are some other hurdles that we need to address in order to make that realistic. But yeah, it's absolutely something that we're considering, and I'm hoping that we can pursue it pretty soon.
Mark, do you see that as something that would be like a per pool sort of option, or would that be across the entire protocol?
Yeah, this has been part of the design challenge for it. There are two ways to do it, obviously, which are the two that you just suggested. One can be on a per pool basis, and then the other one is like protocol wide. On a per pool basis is probably the easiest way to achieve it. Whereas protocol wide, it's unclear how those tokens should be used, right? Because if there's a pool that has produced a huge number of fees or something, then when someone tries to withdraw, you're going to have to implement some logic there that knows which tokens, like the identities of the tokens that are available in that insurance fund, and then know how to perform a swap with them in order to, reimburse the liquidity provider as they withdraw. So that's much more complex. On a per pool basis, though, relatively simple. And yeah, it's just a question of how those insurance funds should be used, right? If it's a first out, first served sort of thing, which is potentially problematic because you can have a type of, you can treat later LPs unfairly, right? If the LPs that were first out kind of get the advantage of having that insurance fund and then deplete it before they leave. So you could have like a pro rata type version of it. And then once you start getting through this design process, you realize that there's some redundancies in there already because of how like the Vortex operates, for example, essentially returns tokens to the pool at a pro rata basis already. So it's kind of already half implemented. There's just maybe some loose ends there where we need to formalize it so that the contracts can accurately represent how much of it is insurance and how much of it is just sort of liquidity in the pool. But I think that one of the advantages to having it collect outside of the pool is that like from a token project's perspective, they can claim that these tokens aren't actually part of the circulating supply, which is something that people often pay attention to. But at present, there is kind of this mechanism in place. It's just that it's technically part of the liquidity of the pool, which means that if the price changes, then that insurance fund is also going to diminish. So yeah, there's always a trade-off, and it's really just about understanding where the rubber hits the road between those two things and finding the best. I don't want to call it a compromise, but finding the best balance between these these two different outcomes, right? Liquidity versus the insurance fund. But yeah, I think on a per pool basis, from an implementation perspective, is the one that's the most attractive. Protocol wide is obviously the holy grail, and is something that we had used with to great effect for about 18 months over version 2.1 up until the deep capitulation. But yeah, like the model holds water, right? As long as we don't have these significant drawdowns, I'm convinced that the model actually makes a lot of sense. So protocol wide, let's say, is something that we can treat as like the light at the end of the tunnel, and a per pool one is something that potentially for tokens that are already setting up an insurance fund like Crown is something that is very, very easy to do. For pools that have no insurance fund at all, it's not as trivial, but still something that's absolutely within the realm of feasibility.
If I can just add to that, for those wondering, why sponsor these kind of pools, they tend to be the big coins, right? It's to all of our overall interest that there's a deep Bitcoin pool and a USDC pool and Ethereum pool, right? This is the reason why, even right now, 90% of the trading fees go to the Vortex, because the health of the overall Bancor ecosystem matters to us. It doesn't, matter on an extreme level, but it matters because that makes Bancor an attractive kind of stock market, if you will, and that brings, more and more eyes and investors. So, what we were proposing, for example, was to continue the Vortex aspect, but then also add an extra insurance to deepen our direct pool insurance, and then also some transaction fees. So, to reward people who are actively staking.
Thank you so much, Dylan. You have such an understanding of all of this. It's refreshing to hear first, and like Mark said earlier, I don't know if it's from your background or just general knowledge on the space and all of everything that's been going on lately. But I have a question for you, kind of in the opposite way. You have this knowledge and this foresight, right? But what has happened maybe throughout this process that you didn't see? Like, you had mentioned these difficult questions that Bancor, that Mark or Tiago had helped you answer. What was something that kind of maybe might have caught you by surprise throughout this process?
You're on mute, by the way.
I was going to say, did I? Dylan?
Maybe.
That's okay. We'll wait for him to come back. Mark, I had a question submitted to you in the meantime.
Sure.
Okay. Dylan, if you come back to us and unmute yourself, by all means, please do. So somebody asked a question, is Bancor looking to focus more on projects like Crown, which are new or, first-time exchange listings?
Yeah, it's a really terrific question. It's been an interesting life cycle for Bancor, because it began life exclusively to support projects like Crown. I think with version 2.1, when the DAO was bootstrapped and we were discussing sort of the insurance mechanism and things, the community kind of rallied behind this idea that we should only support blue chip tokens, if we can call them that, right? The really big market cap stuff, because for some reason those are going to be better from an insurance perspective than sort of the long tail stuff. Now, whether or not that was a good attitude is not what I'm going to opine on, but certainly that was a huge shift, and I think that maybe it was unexpected from a project from a project standpoint. I think that we've always kind of the project has always considered itself something that has serviced the long tail. The spike in interest in blue chip stuff, I think, was, it may be looked back on as kind of a historical curiosity, because, a lot of those tokens like Link and ETH and Bitcoin, they, I think while they provide a valuable utility inside the ecosystem, as Dylan was pointing out, those projects don't really have any need of decentralized liquidity, right? or at least not yet. I think that this might change in the future, depending on how centralized entities decide to value these things in the long run. But for those big projects, they generally already have an abundance of liquidity on centralized exchanges. So there's really no bottleneck for the market to be able to buy and trade these tokens. Whereas, I think for exchanges like ours, it was really for the tokens that haven't yet got listed on things like Coinbase and Binance and, KuCoin and everything else. I think that, what we're hearing from Dylan now is that, there is this massive opportunity to serve projects that are, looking to bootstrap their liquidity for the first time. And I think that, at least for me personally, it's something that I've always been interested in. And, the design principles behind V3, things like external and permanent loss protection and single-sided staking with auto compounding rewards using BN tokens for the intrinsic use case of that project, right? These are all very long-tail facing features. And, I think that they are still very exciting. And, even in the midst of a deep capitulation that's affecting the protocol in a very negative way, we're finding that still, these long tail projects are beating down our door to get liquidity on the platform. And so I think that it is an underserved component of DeFi. I think that a lot of the other product offerings that they might otherwise interface with don't provide them with the sort of support that they need to be successful. And yes, the short answer is I do think that this is something that as a DeFi project, and more than that, as a cryptocurrency project, we want to see projects like Crown succeed. And we know what how difficult it is to kind of get started, and we know how important it is to have liquidity. And yes, if we are as a community convinced that this industry is headed somewhere, and that these things are important, and that that these kinds of ideas hold water, and that their communities need these services provided to them, then we should, I think, do some soul searching and wonder if this is the thing that we ought to be doing more of. I think that it is, and a lot of the stuff that I'm working on right now, I think is going to be is interesting to the industry broadly, but I think is going to be extremely enticing to the long tail specifically. So yeah, my attitude is certainly more towards supporting long tail assets and building out the economy in a more productive sense, looking to support them. But that doesn't mean that the fat tail or mid tail is going to be neglected. But yeah, the short answer is I'm very bullish on the long tail. I want lots of cryptocurrencies, right? That there should be many, many more than we have today, and I think that they can all be successful. And I think that the thing that underpins their success is not just the quality of the project and the team and the things that they're doing, but also the ability to realize exchange value. And so I think that it's a good time for Bancor and its community to reflect on the initial mission statement and really sort of honor what it was that we set out to do.
Thank you so much, Mark. Dylan, I see you unmuting yourself. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I mean, this is a regular occurrence, Twitter, technology-wise. Just to add to Mark's point, I think there's a lot of niche use cases now for coins that were not previously, even discussed, when all the crypto giants started their ideas. There are a lot of indie games that need to bootstrap liquidity and promise their members a coin that they can kind of extract value with and so on. So I think that is really important. And I also think we're going to see people skip the ICO stage like we did for quite some time. I speak regularly to Copper. I think they're an amazing team. But right now in this market, it can do worse for your project to try and do an ICO and fail at that than to take your core members, pull them together, raise, a lot less funds, but get the whole idea started so you can get your devs hired and things, and put a small liquidity pool on a place like Bancor. To answer your previous question, I really was quite surprised when the whole Bancor situation happened, because this just goes to show, it's a complex algorithm. I didn't do enough research. I really thought that the insurance policy was heavily linked to specific pools. I didn't quite understand that it was protocol wide and that someone could, really drain it like they did. So that was quite surprising to me. But, it had a silver lining for us because, after our 48 hours of shock, I turned to Kevin and some of kind of the Crown governors and we said, well, this is opportune. I mean, this really happened well for us, because imagine if we had opened our liquidity pool 2 weeks earlier, which was the initial plan, we would have not only had to kind of do our business of running Crown, we would have had to do a lot more damage control.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. What about in general? Maybe not just in, your initial liquidity pool. What about just in general in launching a new project and creating liquidity and all of the above? What was maybe your biggest obstacle? I mean, you were fortunate that you didn't have to do an ICO phase, right? You were talking about the negatives of that, the potential outcome of that. What was your biggest obstacle?
I think the biggest obstacle is the speed of the space and how quickly the normal market cycles play out in crypto and NFTs, right? In other words, you can go back all the way, to Benjamin Graham, the main teacher of Warren Buffett and stuff. And, the value investors, and I consider myself much more of a value investor than a technical analysis. They used to kind of personify the market as Mr. Market, right? And they would say, Mr. Market's crazy. Sometimes he goes through bouts of euphoria and sometimes he goes through great depressions. But usually, eventually, the underlying value comes back to the mean, right? It comes back to a price that makes sense. And the kind of shocking part to me that I'm still getting used to is both positive and negative in how fast the space moves, right? In how fast the meta quickly changes, the innovation happens, how quickly we pivot in terms of what we want from a project and stuff like that. And that has been quite surprising. It can make me a bit giddy at times, but I think that, it's, as I say, we're almost a normal market on steroids, right? We're working so fast. I mean, if you look at, how fast we've gone from crypto kitties to other side opening now, taking all the best things from the Unreal Engine, it is quite unreal how fast this has happened. And yet at the same time, if you're a builder in the space, it gives you a lot of whiplash and exhaustion, and you have to manage your psyche and your anxiety.
Everything does seriously move super fast, which brings me to another question that was submitted. What do you have going on next? What's on your roadmap? Are you looking to fund new gaming projects and startups?
So we're going fairly conservative. I think that has been our brand both for Fat Cats and for Crown Capital. Even though it annoys some of our members at times because they would like us to be more aggressive, and, we remind them that they don't need to put all of their money just into our project. They can, take the whitelists and opportunities we give them and do the riskier plays. But I think when it comes to games right now, we're quite happy with our portfolio. We've picked what we think are going to be winners. And, the kind of ironic beauty of the bear market is all of the games we've invested in have enormous war chests from the bull market that will give them the funds needed to build their games, right? In other words, when you look at something like Miranda's, they have raised over 500 or 600 million, right? The bear market be damned, they don't give a shit. It doesn't affect their ability to pump out the games. Whereas so many of the good ideas of games coming to us now, they cannot get a foot through the door with the VCs. And so quite frankly, that's almost put for the first time a major barrier of entry. And so, that time sensitivity of like, well, we better be investing in other games because they're going to eclipse these other games we've already invested in is just not true. right? So we're holding steady in our games. We're going to continue to trade those assets. For example, we were dollar cost averaging all the way down with many of the games because we raised our funds in USDC. So as Ethereum was kind of collapsing, we were able to go on a shopping spree. And so we're quite happy with Crown, even if it's a bit boring. Thankfully, the culture and the ethos within the Crown community is, you know, we came here for excellence. We're going to wait for excellence and nothing else will matter.
That's a great ethos, actually, and to stick with that is fantastic. And I'm sure your community is super grateful for not just settling on whatever happens to be here at the moment. Mark, I want to ask you the same question. I don't know how much you can speak to, but, you know, future features, I asked you about what you might be working on. Can't say too much on it, but I want to give you the opportunity to speak to it as well.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I can repeat what I said on Sunday, which is that I began exploring variable fee structures. You know, I was looking at like what Thorchain had implemented. I've also, you know, just recently had a brief look at what Trader Joe is implementing with their sort of Uniswap v3 like market maker. Which for anyone who hasn't seen that white paper, you know, it's basically, you know, it's Uniswap v3 with, I guess, slightly wider tick ranges and a variable fee structure. So it's interesting. I think it's a, you know, it's going to be a successful AMM, and you know, I'm excited to see what they get done. But that variable fee research that I did, I kind of, it took me down a really long winding rabbit hole where I started to look at you know, things much more generally, particularly how it affects the price of tokens and the effect of trade volumes and things like that. And you know, I ended up discovering something sort of pretty elemental, is the way that I've described it, something very close to the metal. And yeah, I'm very optimistic that it's going to find quite a lot of value. It's a very generic feature, and it's still, like, I would say it's in the very late stages of research. I'm still speaking with like product and, you know, discussing what it's going to look like from you know, from all of the different sort of like user pathways and things like that. But yeah, look, it's I know that I haven't been super active on socials recently. I actually make a deliberate effort to keep off of Twitter. I keep out of Telegram as much as possible, just because, you know, I've been harassed a lot over the last few months, and I think that my productivity is just much higher when I'm not present for you know, what is generally a very unhelpful you know, blame laying conversation. But yeah, look, I have got something that I think is really exciting, and it's got a lot of possibilities. And yeah, I'm absolutely determined to bring it to fruition. And I think that it's going to be of, like I said, I think earlier in the call, I think that it is going to have broad market appeal, but specifically, I can see it of being of special utility to the long tail. And I think if we continue to lean into these new developing projects and their liquidity needs, and, you know, a couple of other things that we haven't necessarily discussed explicitly on this call, but have been alluded to several times. You know, basically, I think I have a deep appreciation for what the liquidity problems are facing the long tail, and I've got I'm working on something that's going to make things even easier for projects like Crown to be successful. And I think that that's going to translate well into you know, the success of our project as well, right? I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to do everything that I can to make things better, right? I want DeFi to be better, and yeah, the stuff that I've been researching it makes me much more optimistic about the future of AMMs than maybe I have been over the past couple of months.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing what you can so far with everyone. I think with that, I just want to thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you to all of the listeners for joining as well. Dylan, if anybody wants to know more about Crown Capital. I know that you guys have your Twitter. I shared a couple of things up on top, and Fat Cats DAO as well. And Mark, obviously, if anybody wants to know anything else, they can get on our Bancor Twitter, keep themselves updated, and our governance as well. Dylan, you also mentioned a Discord earlier. You have one for Crown and for Fat Cats?
Yeah, so if they head to crowncapital.games, they can join the Discord for Crown Capital, and that's where all the fun happens. And for as little as 1 Crown token, you can get the holder role in the lounge. So that's very much worth doing. As for Fat Cats, we keep a locked Discord just because we have so many partnerships with other alpha communities and research groups. But if anyone here does want to join the Fat Cats community, please send me a message and I will send you an invite link. And, thank you so much for doing this, Jen and Mark. I'm sure we'll kind of do this again sometime, maybe catch up in a few months from now, see what's going on, because this space is still remarkably exciting. Sometimes it's hard to see that, when the sky is falling. But, as Ryan Carson of 121 Gigawatt Fund and Moonbird said to me, the most exciting thing about Web3 to both of us is still probably property rights. It's still so novel, so exciting. And as Mark added, the ability to transfer stuff, that I keep kind of using that as my guiding light and reminding me, what's special about the space. And everyone, get off Twitter sometimes and go touch some grass.
Right. Thank you so much. And I definitely look forward to doing this again. So thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to our listeners. And we will speak with you soon.
Thank you so much, Dylan. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to our next spaces.